Hello and welcome back to Bigfoot Lake. Tonight we take a journey to southern Ohio for a Bigfoot encounter. This story was sent in by our good friend Tina. So pull up a stump, sit back, relax, and let's take a journey to southern Ohio and hear Tina's story. Hi Bigfoot. I normally don't pass along stories other than to family if I haven't witnessed them myself. But since you were doing tales that other people have sent, and not always first-hand ones, I thought I would send this one to you. I hope you enjoy it. This happened to my oldest brother and a pastor at our church. I was a teenager when this occurred, and my brother passed away a few years back, so I can't ask him exactly where this happened, other than somewhere in southern Ohio, because of the hills he said they were driving in. Anyway, here is their Bigfoot tale. My brother was a deacon in our church, and he and the pastor were coming home from a church conference out of state, Tennessee, I believe. They didn't want to stay another night, and they decided to push through. Because of a detour they had to take because of an accident, they shut the highway. So he said it was around 2 a.m. when they were directed to take a 2-lane rural road. At this point, they were approaching another hill and the pastor was driving. My brother suggested he slow down in case they came upon a deer, but he only slowed down a little. On the downslope of that hill, he said this huge thing standing upright on 2 legs was just right there in their lane. My brother said when the headlights hit it, he could see red eye shine. My brother was a hunter and said he'd only seen red eye shine on predators like coyotes, bobcats, and such. The pastor tried to avoid hitting it, and he swerved to the right towards the ditch, but they end up hitting it anyway on the driver's side. He said right before they hit it, he could see it was covered in hair, but he got the impression that the face wasn't completely covered by hair, but couldn't make out any more than that before they collided with it. My brother thinks he was unconscious for a while, but didn't know how long, and the pastor was still unconscious, but at the time my brother didn't know how badly they were both hurt. He couldn't wake the pastor up and knew he had to try to get help, but was afraid that the thing they hit was still out there, so he waited for a bit before trying to get out of the car. He tried making some noise to see if he could get its attention if it was still out there. At this point, he said the pastor woke up, but he kept drifting in and out of consciousness. So my brother was able to reach over and put on the hazard lights before he got out to start walking. He said that he tried to be really quiet getting out and sneaking around to the front of the car to see if this thing was still there, but he didn't see whatever it was. He said he was very dizzy and was trying to get his balance before he started walking and before he could hear the thrashing sounds around in the woods. Then some rocks came flying out of the woods, hitting the car, and the scariest noises he had ever heard, somewhere between a scream and a bellow. He decided it would be a better idea to stay in the car and wait for help, thinking if he didn't come in an hour or so, or the noise stopped, he would try then. He said he got some clothing and handkerchiefs out of his suitcase and was able to tend to his and the pastor's cuts. He said he thought it was about an hour later that someone came by and then went to call for help. The police and rescue came and he got out of the car, and then he said in the light of the vehicles he could see just how the left-hand side of the car had hit, but it was enough to break the headlight and the grille. He said there was blood and hair on the car, but not as much as he expected to see. As he was telling the police the story, he thought to himself, they weren't very surprised at what he described that they hit, but they did seem surprised that they hit it, making him very confused. And when he asked them about it, the officer said that they get calls and sightings of what he described, but had never heard of anyone hitting one. My brother said, "Wait, you know what this thing is?" He said, "Yeah, man, you described Bigfoot. Don't you have any idea where you're from?" My brother told him that this was his first time hearing of Bigfoot, but the pastor called out, "I've heard of them before, but just thought they were tall tales. Ha ha ha, get it? Tall tale." My brother laughed because he thought he was just loopy from the cracked noggin, or that the EMTs had given him pain meds and they made him loopy. They made him go in the ambulance with the pastor to the hospital. Once at the hospital, the officer was waiting to talk to them, to go back over his story, and to talk to the pastor. He said, "Are you boys sure you weren't drinking?" and asked if he could draw some blood to check. My brother laughed at him and told him to go ahead, and the officer wanted to know why he was laughing. So he pulled out his church business card or church ID or whatever, which then had the officer laughing. He said, "Well, we should still do a blood test just to be able to document and for insurance in case they fight paying for the accident." He then asked my brother if he was sure it wasn't a deer, to which my brother said, "Well, it might have been a deer, a doe, because it didn't have any antlers, and if they stand around 8 feet tall and have long shaggy hair and have red eyes, it could have been a deer." The officer said they get reports from people all the time like what he described, but that he and most of his fellow cops had never seen one, but that the county sheriff claims he saw one when he was a boy out hunting with his dad. He said that the pastor had the same story as my brother, except for what happened when my brother got out of the car the first time. When my brother got back home, everyone wanted him to tell them what happened, but all he would say was that they hit an animal and had an accident, because he didn't want anyone to think he was nuts. When the pastor was finally able to come back to preach in church, my brother and another deacon filled in while he was off. The first thing out of his mouth was the story of what happened to them. At first, everyone laughed, but then turned to my brother and asked if it was true or whether they had schemed to pull a joke on everybody. He told them, "Nope, it really happened. He just didn't want everyone to think he was crazy, so he didn't tell anyone the story." The pastor had broken ribs from hitting the steering wheel, a broken or fractured leg, lacerations to his head from hitting the door window, and a fractured wrist. My brother had lacerations to his head and a concussion from hitting the passenger door window and the dashboard, and his right shoulder was injured from hitting the door. Thank God neither went through the windshield thanks to the seat belts, which the pastor's car was older, so it only had the lap belts. We were all just thankful that the car hit it with just the left side of the car and not head on, because if they had, no telling how badly they would have been hurt. And that it was an older car, back when they were still made well, out of steel or whatever, not soda cans like now. Please don't feel like you have to read this during a video. You're welcome to if you wish. Your friend Tina. So that is certainly an amazing story from southern Ohio, and this one hits kind of close to home for me because I'm originally from southeast Ohio, and I know what those hills and those forests look like. There's a whole lot of mystery in those hills and forests. And the first time I read this story when Tina sent it to me, I wasn't surprised that they saw a Bigfoot in the road or hit one with their car. It was the thing that surprised me was the reaction of the police. They weren't even surprised at them describing this beast to them, this creature. They weren't surprised at that. They were more surprised that their vehicle was able to hit this thing. So maybe that says a whole lot about those hills in southern Ohio. So, what do you guys think? What do you guys think of the story? You think this is a legitimate Bigfoot encounter? Sure seems real to me. It just doesn't seem like a story that's made up at all. So I want to thank Tina for sending this in, and leave a comment on what your thoughts are on this. Have you ever seen anything like this while driving? Have your headlights ever hit an animal or a creature that you just couldn't explain? And if you're from southern Ohio, you know the woods in that area, and you know how remote some of those parts are. So any of you from southern Ohio have any thoughts on this? I would love to hear them. So that concludes our story for tonight. I want to thank each and every one of you for stopping by to hear Tina's story. So hope you have a great night, and before you leave, please hit that thumbs up, and if you're not already subscribed, hit that subscribe button. And thank you each and every one for that. Hope you have a great night, and we'll see you on the next.